What's up guys, today's video will be a bit more of a rant session than anything else, so stay tuned for this. As a languages enthusiast, there's little more annoying than people trying to create rules about their language that don't exist. They're even in Instagram comments. I got a bit to say, so let's go. First off, so that I don't have to say it the long way for the rest of this video, I need to define two words. First up, prescriptivist. Prescriptivist means that you pick it up at a pharmacy. Yeah, that was just a joke. Okay, really, a prescriptivist is someone who tries to govern their language based on prescribed rules, hence the name. They're not real linguists, they're the bad guys in this story, and they're the reason that at the beginning of this video, I had to describe myself as a languages enthusiast, because these idiots are so ubiquitous that when I say language enthusiast, people think I'm talking about them. What they call language is a fraud, it's a mockery of language. So what's their antithesis? Descriptivists, i.e. any real language people, are people who analyze languages by describing them, using what's actually there to talk about a language. As it stands outside the linguistic community, the prescriptivists have control of the narrative on this. We, as, hopefully by the end of this video, descriptivists, need to overwhelm them in society at large and change the narrative in the name of real linguistics. Sorry in advance about the overwhelming Anglocentrism. Before we get into any examples, I have one thing that has stuck with me about the power of prescriptivists, so it's story time. I remember very vividly when I had just started college, I was in my first class of Intro to Linguistics. The professor was going over the syllabus, and towards the end of the introduction section, the line was written, "This class will not help you improve your writing skills." I wasn't really surprised to see that written there, I just thought college students would be better than that, as the sentence clearly indicated to me that there must have been one too many students in the past who signed up for Intro to Linguistics thinking that linguistics was some kind of art of composition, and that's just sad, like, grade school really failed whichever students did that. So hopefully I can do my part here to help rising college students not make that mistake. First example of prescriptivist making a rule in English that doesn't exist and expecting people to follow it, preposition stranding. In case you need a refresher, preposition stranding is the way that clauses connect prepositions between them in various Germanic languages, specifically putting the preposition at the end of the subordinate clause away from the noun that it modifies. This, of course, includes English, but the prescriptivists don't want you to know that. Prescriptivists have spent over 300 years insisting that sentences with stranded prepositions are ungrammatical. The concept only arose in 1672 when some dude named John Dryden said he didn't like it. Since then, other prescriptivists have hopped on board to gang up on innocent civilians just trying to speak or write. Dryden didn't actually give a reason, but based on his style of writing, people think he was simping for Latin, a language which doesn't allow stranding. This checks out as Latin and its descendant French, which also doesn't do stranding, have been prestige languages in England. The bottom line here, preposition stranding is completely grammatical in English, and it's never been the other way. Okay, new topic. Something that Anglophone second grade teachers would say all the time that will probably unpleasantly jog y'all's memories is, "This person and I." Unfortunately, this common prescriptivist line has a linguistic precedent and it involves cases. This makes even me a little on the fence about its morality. Basically, English has two main cases that only apply to pronouns, nominative, which is for subjects, and oblique, which is basically a fancy linguistic term for any and all objects. However, modern English speakers greatly prefer the oblique pronouns over the nominative ones. As native English speakers, if we have any noun phrase that involves a pronoun and some other noun, we will use the oblique form of the pronoun, even if it's a subject. This is what our teachers were saying was wrong. Instead of "me and these shoes go well together," they wanted "these shoes and I go well together," since I is nominative. However, this is still prescriptivist, as speakers obviously prefer me, and as any descriptivist will tell you, grammar is just whatever native speakers of a language decide is correct. Therefore, we can have additional complicated rules about pronoun case, in this case saying that the oblique is preferred in noun phrases with multiple nouns, even in subject position. As well, this second grade correction causes an additional conundrum. A teacher would never correct that phrase in object position because the oblique case belongs there. Given that the subject correction is what echoes in people's heads, many people who don't know linguistics think that the noun phrases we're talking about always have nominative case. This is known as hypercorrection, and it results in people, mostly highly educated in other areas, saying stuff like, "The secret is between you and I." But technically that's not wrong either, since they're a native speaker saying it. This one is the most morally complicated prescriptivist claim. As a languages enthusiast, I use both of them in the appropriate case, and sometimes have to consciously force myself to say nominative "me and" in casual context to sound more natural. Now let's debunk a more obviously wrong claim, that you can't start a sentence with certain conjunctions. You've probably heard this rule as "don't start with and." I'm here to tell you that you can start your sentence any way you want if it sounds right. This is one of those nitpicky writing rules that doesn't work in practice. Sometimes it makes sense to start a sentence with and or. And another one of these is that you have to use the same tense throughout a paragraph. I guarantee that if you tried this, your writing would make no sense. They didn't even enforce this past 4th grade for me, so I don't know why they would say it in the first place. Use whatever tense you need to use. One of the most annoying things that prescriptivists say, though, is, "That's not what that word means." The entire premise of linguistics is that languages change over time, and this includes the meanings of words. This is known as semantic drift, and it's why some words that have the same root mean different things. Take, for example, horror. It's a sensation of scaredness. Now take terror. It means roughly the same thing. Now, horrific describes something that makes you feel horror. So the same must apply for terrific, right? Nope. Because of semantic drift, terrific now describes something overwhelmingly awesome, despite sharing an origin with terror. Regardless, there are still some rather extreme prescriptivists who will tell you that you're wrong if you say that your birthday cake tastes terrific. Personally, I would really like to see them call terrorism terrific and see how quickly they get on the no-fly list. Yes, they're etymologically related, but that doesn't mean one can describe the other. And it seems like prescriptivists only like certain time periods for this. For example, the ancestor of the modern English word fee, meaning essentially a price, Old English velch, was commonly used to mean cow or livestock, while its Proto-Indo-European base, becu, primarily meant livestock and never had anything to do with money. But I don't hear any prescriptivists telling us that we should be saying fees eat grass or I see 7 fees grazing on the hillside. I wonder if prescriptivists are even aware of Proto-Indo-European, since they're nothing more than the creationists of the language realm. There's really nothing more to it. Words and meanings have evolved to this point naturally, and you should feel confident using them as they're used now. In the end, prescriptivists have way too much clout in the education system, and this allows them to appropriate the words English and language, making many innocent students think that's what language is, rather than the amazing world of systems and evolution that makes up legitimate linguistics. I'm not saying writing is unimportant, it just needs to be distinguished more from what they're appropriating it to be. There's also an obvious elitist element to prescriptivism from all the controls they put. The moral here, be descriptivist. Are you from another country or language? If so, comment about any prescriptivism complaints you have against your own society. I'd enjoy learning about it. Thanks for watching, and a more useful video for me will hopefully be out shortly.